My name is Juliette Dubois. I'm 35, and I'm the chef who poured her soul into earning 3 Michelin stars for El Idol Falante in New York. But after 5 years of devotion, Arthur Vance, my boss and the man I loved, fired me without a second thought. He handed my entire kitchen, the stars, and my life's work over to his 22-year-old intern, his new mistress. He didn't just throw me out. He stole the very book of my secret recipes and claimed my intellectual soul as his property. He thought he had crushed me. But he didn't understand that recipes on paper are just soulless words. The real magic is in the chef's hands and heart. From a tiny kitchen in Brooklyn, I began my silent revenge. This is the story of how I used a single plate of pasta to destroy a multi-million-dollar empire and prove that he could steal my recipes, but he could never steal a chef's soul. The hiss of the pan is the first sound I truly hear each day. Not the alarm, not the groan of the city waking up, but the precise moment a perfectly dried scallop, kissed with clarified butter, meets the searing heat of my copper pan. It's a song, a promise. It's the sound of 3 Michelin stars being earned, night after night. "Marco, how are we on the risotto? I want it al dente, each grain distinct, a sea of creamy saffron but not a mush," I called out, my voice cutting through the controlled chaos of a Saturday night service. My sous chef Marco, a man whose serious brow was permanently furrowed in concentration, nodded without looking up from his station. "2 minutes, chef, just finishing with the parmesan. The texture is perfect." I trusted him implicitly. He'd been with me since we earned the 2nd star. He understood my palate, my rhythm. He knew that when I said perfect, I meant it in the most literal, unforgiving sense of the word. Across the pass, I watched the dining room. A sea of crisp white tablecloths, glittering crystal, and the soft, murmuring reverence of people about to spend $1,000 on dinner. They weren't just paying for food, they were paying for an experience, a story. And I was the author. Every plate that left my kitchen was a paragraph, every course a chapter. Tonight's special was the culmination of weeks of work. Seared diver scallop on a bed of saffron risotto, topped with a single, translucent sheet of what I called a veil of the sea. It looked like glass but dissolved on the tongue into a wave of intense, briny essence of the ocean. "Liam, plating, now," I commanded. A young line cook, Liam, whose ambition burned almost as hot as the stoves, rushed forward with the warmed plates. He was fast, talented, but he lacked soul. He saw cooking as a series of steps, a formula. He didn't understand the alchemy. As he spooned the risotto, I stopped his hand. "No, gently, you're making a bed, not a pile. It has to cradle the scallop. Show it some respect." He nodded, chastised, and corrected his motion. I placed the seared scallop, its caramelized crust a perfect shade of mahogany, onto the golden risotto. Then, with tweezers, I lifted the veil. This was my secret. The recipe in the master binder simply said seafood essence reduction. It didn't mention the slow-steeped kombu, the 2 drops of smoked paprika oil, or the final whip with a frozen whisk to create the delicate crystalline structure. Those secrets weren't for binders. They lived in my hands, in my memory. They were the difference between excellent and transcendent. Arthur Vance, the owner of El Idol Falante and the man who shared my bed, glided into the kitchen. He never walked, he glided. Dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford suit, he was the picture of New York's sophistication. He was the front of house, the charm, the money. I was the engine, the fire, the art. "Juliette, my love," he said, his voice a smooth baritone that always seemed to find a way to calm the kitchen's frenzy. "Table 7 is ecstatic. Julian Croft just told the maitre d' that the scallop was a whisper of God." His words. I felt a flush of pride. Julian Croft. The one critic from the New York Times whose opinion could elevate a chef to legend or banish them to obscurity. He was famously ruthless. A whisper of God was the highest praise imaginable. "Good, send them the sommelier, a bottle of the 08 Montrachet. On me," I said, my focus already shifting to the next order. "Of course," Arthur smiled, but his eyes weren't on the food. They were on me, a little too intense. "Juliette, can you spare a moment after service? In my office." "Is everything all right?" I asked, wiping a microscopic smudge from the rim of a plate before sending it out. "Everything's perfect, just business, planning for the future." He squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that once felt intimate but lately had become proprietary. He walked away, leaving a trail of expensive cologne in his wake. Marco caught my eye. "Everything okay, chef?" He said it's perfect, I replied, forcing a smile, but a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Arthur only talked about the future when he wanted something. The rest of the service was a blur of searing, saucing, and plating. We were a well-oiled machine, and I was its conductor. By 1 a.m., the last dessert had gone out, the final "we, chef" had been uttered, and the familiar quiet of a post-service kitchen settled in. I wiped down my station, the familiar ritual calming my nerves. I found Arthur in his office, a sleek, minimalist space that was the polar opposite of my warm, chaotic kitchen. He was swirling a glass of Macallan 25, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. "We did it, Jules," he said without turning around. "Another flawless night. Croft is going to write another love letter. The reservation line will crash tomorrow morning." "That's what we do, Arthur," I said, leaning against the doorframe, my chef's white stained with the evidence of my hard work. He turned, and the smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. "That's what you do, and you're brilliant, the best, but a shooting star can't shine forever in the same spot. It has to keep moving. The restaurant has to evolve." The knot in my stomach turned to ice. "Evolve how? Are you talking about renovations again? Because the kitchen needs a new ventilation system before we get another piece of art for the lobby. It's not about the decor, Juliet, it's about the narrative, the brand." He took a sip of scotch. "Elatal Falante needs a new story, a fresh perspective." I crossed my arms. "I give you a new story every season, Arthur. My menu is constantly evolving." "Your style is distinct," he corrected gently. "And it's been wonderful, truly. But the market craves novelty, youth, a new face." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" He finally looked me in the eye. "I'm saying I'm grateful for everything you've done. You've built this empire with me, but it's time for a change in leadership in the kitchen." I stared at him, the hum of the city outside suddenly deafening. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "A change in your firing me?" I laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "You can't be serious. This is my kitchen, my life's work. My name is synonymous with this restaurant. The restaurant's name is on the deed that I own," he said, his voice losing its warmth, replaced by a chilling finality. "And I've decided to go in a new direction." "With who?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt in years. "Liam. He can't even plate a risotto properly. Who could possibly replace me?" He had the decency to look away for a second, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Isabelle Morrow. She just graduated top of her class at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris. She's young, innovative. She has a vision that I think will be very exciting." Isabelle, the new intern, the quiet 22-year-old who had been shadowing me for the past month, the one he said was the daughter of an old friend. The one I had seen him laughing with in the alley behind the restaurant just last week. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a business decision. This was a betrayal of the deepest kind. "You're sleeping with her," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "My personal life is not relevant," he said coolly. "You're giving my kitchen, my stars, my life's work to your new girlfriend?" I was shouting now. "After 5 years? After everything I've poured into this place?" "You've been well compensated, Juliet. This was never about money. For me, it was always a business," he said, his voice flat. "And this is what's best for the business. Isabelle starts as executive chef on Monday." I felt a dizzying wave of nausea. "And what about my recipes, the Veil of the Sea, the duck confit that took me a year to perfect, my intellectual property?" He smiled, a thin, cruel slash across his face. "You developed those recipes in my kitchen, on my payroll. They belong to Elatal Falante. I had you write them down for the master binder, remember? For posterity, the binder, the leather-bound book where I had, at his insistence, meticulously documented every single recipe. I felt like a fool, a complete and utter fool. "You can't just take them," I said, my voice breaking. They're me. "They're assets," he corrected. "And they're staying here. Security will escort you to your locker. You can collect your knives and any personal effects. Your final check will be messengered to you." He turned his back to me then, a clear dismissal, and looked back out at the city lights, as if he were already looking at his bright new future, one I was not a part of. I stood frozen for a moment, the silence in the room screaming. Then a cold, hard calm washed over me. The heartbreak was still there, a physical ache in my chest, but beneath it something else was stirring. A single, defiant thought. He has the pages. He has the words. But he doesn't have the music. I turned without another word and walked out of his office. I passed Marco in the hallway. He saw the look on my face and his own grew pale. "Chef, Juliet, what's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I just shook my head and kept walking. Past the kitchen that was no longer mine. Past the staff that I had trained and nurtured. I walked out the front door of Elatal Falante for the last time, the weight of 3 Michelin stars suddenly gone, replaced by the crushing weight of betrayal. The New York night had never felt so cold. He thought he had taken everything. He was wrong. He had only taken the things that didn't matter. I woke up on the couch, still in my chef's whites from the night before, now rumpled and smelling faintly of clarified butter and defeat. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Tribeca loft I had shared with Arthur. Our loft. No, his loft. I looked around at the curated emptiness of the space. The minimalist Italian sofa, the abstract painting he'd paid a fortune for, the polished concrete floors. It was his taste, his money. I had just been the artist in residence. My knife roll lay on the coffee table where I'd dropped it. I ran my hand over the worn leather. This was mine. This was the only thing in this entire apartment that truly belonged to me. Inside were the extensions of my own hands. The Japanese santoku, sharp enough to slice a tomato by its own weight, the small, nimble paring knife I'd had since my first apprenticeship in Lyon, the heavy German cleaver. They were my tools, my voice, and they were silent. For hours, I just sat there. The shock had subsided, leaving behind a hollow, cavernous ache. It wasn't just the job. It wasn't just the man. It was the complete erasure of my identity. For 5 years, I was Juliette Dubois of L'Adel Falante. The name was a title, a brand, a shield. Without it, who was I? Just a 35-year-old woman with a box of expensive knives and a closet full of clothes she could no longer afford. My phone buzzed on the table, a frantic vibration against the wood. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Finally, annoyed, I glanced at the screen. It was Marco. My heart sank. I didn't want to talk to him, didn't want the pity, the questions. But he was persistent. I finally answered, my voice a croak. What? Chef, thank God. His voice was a panicked whisper. Chef, it's a catastrophe down here. It's not my kitchen anymore, Marco, I said, my voice flat. I know, Chef, but she can't do it. The new one, Isabelle. He sounded out of breath. She tried to make the Veil of the Sea for the lunch service. She followed the recipe in the binder, to the letter. I watched her. Chef, it came out like cloudy, salty dishwater. It had no structure. No life. She almost cried when it broke apart in the pan. A tiny, bitter spark ignited in the cold emptiness of my chest. Did you tell her about the kombu? The what? Chef, the recipe just says seafood essence reduction. There's nothing in there about kombu, or paprika oil, or whatever magic you do. It's not magic, Marco, it's technique. Well, she doesn't have it, and Arthur, he's furious. He told her she just needs to follow the instructions. He doesn't understand. And Liam is practically kissing her feet, telling her everything she does is brilliant, probably hoping to get my job. The disgust in his voice was palpable. The whole kitchen knows it's a sham. We can't produce your food without you. It's like having the sheet music but no conductor. My own words from the night before echoed back at me. He has the pages but not the music. Exactly, Chef. What should we do? He pleaded. The spark flickered brighter. It wasn't triumph, not yet. But it was something. It was the confirmation of a truth I held dear. Cooking isn't a recipe, it's a soul, and he hadn't been able to steal mine. You do your job, Marco, I said, my voice a little stronger now. Cook the food you're told to cook, perfectly, and document everything, every mistake she makes, every shortcut, every time Arthur yells at her. Understand? There was a pause. Oui, chef, he said, the understanding dawning in his voice. I understand. And Marco, be careful. Always, chef. I hung up the phone and stared at my knives again. He thought he could just plug in a new chef, a new face, and the machine would keep running. He thought my art was a simple commodity that could be transferred via ink on paper. The arrogance was breathtaking. Just then I heard a key in the lock. My stomach clenched Arthur. But it wasn't him. The door swung open and my best friend, Elena Vance, strode in like a hurricane, her arms laden with a large paper bag. She was an art dealer with a gallery in Chelsea, a woman who moved through the world with the same sharp, decisive energy I reserved for my kitchen. Okay, the pity party is officially over, she announced, dropping the bag on the counter. The smell of fresh coffee and almond croissants filled the air. She took one look at my face and her own softened. Oh, honey, it's that bad? I just nodded, the tears I'd been holding back finally starting to fall. She was across the room in a second, wrapping her arms around me. I sobbed into her shoulder, a mess of grief and rage and humiliation. Tell me everything, she said, leading me to the sofa. And don't leave out a single gory detail. I want to know exactly what shade of sociopath we're dealing with. Between sips of the hot, life-giving coffee, I told her. About Arthur's speech, about the intern, Isabelle, about the stolen recipes. When I finished, Elena was silent, her jaw tight. She wasn't the there type of friend. Her brand of comfort was strategic fury. Okay, she said finally, her voice dangerously calm. First, we call my lawyer. We need to see if there's any way to fight for the intellectual property. It's a long shot, but we try. Second, you're not staying here tonight. You're coming home with me. I will not have you sleeping in the enemy's fortress. Third, and most importantly, we are going to ruin him. I managed a weak smile. And how do we do that? He has the restaurant, the name, the money. Juliet, listen to me, she said, leaning forward, her dark eyes intense. He has a book of recipes. You are the recipes. He has a beautiful piece of hardware, but you are the soul of the machine. Without you, it's just a very expensive kitchen that serves mediocre food. Marco's call proved it. But he'll just hire someone else when he realizes she's a failure, I argued. Someone with their own stars, their own name. And what will that chef do? Cook your food? No, they'll change the menu. And El Idol Falante, as the world knows, it will cease to exist. The brand he was so desperate to evolve will be destroyed anyway. He's an idiot. She was right, the logic was flawless. So what do? I asked, feeling the first real glimmer of hope. I'm sure he made me sign a non-compete clause. I can't just go open a new 3-star place across the street. Of course you can't, and you won't, she said, a slow, cunning smile spreading across her face. You're going to do the exact opposite. You're not going to compete with him, you're going to make him irrelevant. How? Think about it. What's the one thing that world of fine dining fears more than a bad review? I considered it. An empty dining room? Close, she said. The idea that they're missing out on something. The idea that the best, the most exciting, the most authentic food isn't in their multi-million-dollar dining room, but somewhere else. Somewhere unexpected. She stood up and began to pace, her mind clicking like the gears of a complex watch. You're not going to be Juliette Dubois, the celebrity chef. You're going to disappear. You're going to find the smallest, most unassuming kitchen in the city, a place no one would ever look for you, and you're going to cook. A memory surfaced. A kind, weathered face, hands stained with tomato sauce, a booming laugh. There's a guy, I said slowly, the idea taking root. Salvatore Rossi. He runs a small place in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. Sal's Trattoria. He's my produce guy, best tomatoes in the 5 boroughs. He always said if I ever got tired of the fancy stuff and wanted to cook real food, his kitchen was always open. Elena stopped pacing and beamed at me. It was a predatory, triumphant smile. Perfect. A ghost kitchen. No name, no publicity, you'll be a phantom. And then, when the time is right, we'll summon the god of this little universe of yours. Julian Croft, I whispered, the plan blossoming in my mind, beautiful and terrifying in its audacity. Exactly, Elena confirmed. We're not going to start a war, Juliet. We're going to stage a quiet little coup, and we're going to do it with nothing but a paring knife and a perfect plate of pasta. The first step in staging a coup, I decided, was to conduct a strategic retreat. Elena was right. I couldn't stay in his loft, breathing his air, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that was no longer mine. I packed a single suitcase. I walked past the closet filled with designer dresses and shoes Arthur had bought me, the uniform for his arm candy, and instead pulled out my oldest jeans, a few simple t-shirts, and my worn, comfortable clogs. I left the expensive jewelry he'd given me in its velvet box on the dresser. I did, however, take a very old, dog-eared copy of Le Guide Culinaire by Escoffier. It had been my grandmother. It was the only thing in that apartment that held any real value. As I was zipping the suitcase, Arthur walked in. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with an air of mild annoyance, as if I were a mess he'd have to clean up. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his voice laced with condescending amusement. "I would have thought you'd put up more of a fight." "You mistake a battle for the war, Arthur," I said calmly, not looking at him. I picked up my knife roll. "You wanted a new story for the restaurant. You're about to get one." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Don't be dramatic, Juliet. In a month, you'll be begging for a sous chef position somewhere in the village. This town has a short memory for fallen stars." I finally turned to face him, my expression unreadable. "And it has no memory at all for comets that burn out. You should have remembered that my name wasn't on the lease, but it was on the menu, every single page." I walked past him without another glance. I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly, decisively. The final click of the lock was more satisfying than any scream. The subway ride to Brooklyn felt like a journey to another country. I emerged from the station in Carroll Gardens into a world away from the steel and glass canyons of Manhattan. Here, brownstones stood shoulder to shoulder, their stoops decorated with flower pots. The air smelled of bakeries and laundry and the faint, salty tang of the nearby Gowanus Canal. It smelled real. Sal's Trattoria was exactly as I remembered it. A simple green awning, a window filled with potted basil plants, and a hand-painted sign that looked like it hadn't been changed since the 1970s. It was humble, unassuming, and utterly authentic. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Bell jingled. The place was empty, caught in the late afternoon lull between lunch and dinner. It was small, maybe 15 tables covered in red and white checkered cloths. The air was thick with the holy trinity of Italian cooking: garlic, olive oil, and simmering tomatoes. A mountain of a man with a flour-dusted apron and a magnificent white mustache emerged from the kitchen. Salvatore Rossi. His face, usually wreathed in a booming smile when he delivered my produce, was etched with concern when he saw me. "Juliet, figlia mia, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice a gravelly rumble. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse, Sal," I said, setting down my suitcase. "I think I've become one." He wiped his hands on his apron and led me to a small table in the corner. "Sit, talk." He disappeared for a moment and returned with 2 small glasses and a bottle of homemade grappa. He poured 2 generous shots. "First, we drink. Then you tell old Sal what happened." The grappa burned a welcome trail down my throat, and just like I had with Alina, I told him everything. He listened patiently, his bushy eyebrows furrowing deeper with every word. When I told him about Arthur giving my recipes to the intern, he slammed his fist on the table, making the glasses jump. "Disgraziato," he roared. "A man who steals a cook's soul is no man at all. He is a thief, a vulture." He looked at me, his expression softening. "So, the great Chef Dubois is without a kitchen." "And without a name, it seems," I said, looking down at my hands. "Bah, a name is for a tombstone, a cook needs a stove. So why are you here? You want I should rough up this Arthur for you? I know some people." I couldn't help but smile. "As tempting as that is, Sal, I have a different kind of revenge in mind. I came to ask you about your offer, the one you always make when you bring the tomatoes." He leaned back, stroking his mustache, his shrewd eyes studying me. "The offer to cook real food." I was joking mostly. What would a 3-star chef want with my little place? Here, we make pasta. We make meatballs. We don't make whispers of God. "Maybe I'm tired of whispering," I said, my voice gaining conviction. "I want to cook food that people eat, not just admire. Food that makes them happy, not reverent. I need a kitchen, Sal, and a stove. I'll wash dishes, I'll chop onions, I'll do whatever you need. I need to cook." He was silent for a long time, studying my face, searching for something. "You have fire in your eyes again," he said finally. "But it's a different kind of fire. Not the one that wants to conquer the world, the one that wants to build something," he sighed. "The thing is, Juliet, my kitchen is small. My granddaughter Maria, she helps me now. She's a good girl, but she's not a chef. We get by. I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I just want a place to work. Anonymously. No one can know I'm here." "Anonymous?" He raised an eyebrow. "A chef like you, that's like asking a lion to pretend it's a house cat." "I'm serious, Sal. I need this. Let me prove it." He stared at me for another moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. "Okay, you want to cook in my kitchen? You cook. But first, a test." "A test? See, you want to cook real food? Let me see. I'm going to give you 5 ingredients. My best San Marzano tomatoes, a head of garlic, some basil from the window, a bag of spaghetti, and my good olive oil. Make me lunch." It was the simplest test imaginable. And the hardest. A simple tomato sauce, a pomodoro, has nowhere to hide. No foams, no veils, no exotic spices. It is purely about technique and respect for the ingredients. It was a test of my soul as a cook. "Your kitchen?" I asked. He gestured with a grand sweep of his arm. "Be my guest." I walked into his kitchen. It was the size of my pantry at Ladle Falante. It was cramped, hot, and cluttered, but everything was clean and well-loved. The scent of yeast and garlic was baked into the very walls. It felt like a hug. I tied on a spare apron and went to work. I didn't think. I just moved. I crushed the garlic clove with the flat of my knife, releasing its aroma without the bitterness of a press. I dropped it into the warm, fragrant olive oil, letting it sizzle gently, infusing the oil with its flavor. I tore the basil leaves with my hands, not a knife, to avoid bruising them. I crushed the tomatoes myself, feeling their texture, their life, between my fingers. I tasted everything at every stage. The sauce simmered, the spaghetti boiled in water as salty as the sea. In 10 minutes, it was done. I tossed the pasta in the sauce, adding a splash of the starchy cooking water to create a creamy emulsion that would coat every strand. I twirled a perfect nest of spaghetti onto a simple white plate and garnished it with a single, fresh basil leaf. I carried the plate out to Sal. He was sitting where I had left him, watching me with an unreadable expression. I placed the plate in front of him. He didn't speak. He simply picked up his fork, twirled the spaghetti like a man who had done it a million times, and took a bite. He closed his eyes. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. He chewed slowly, deliberately. I felt more nervous than I ever had waiting for a review from Julian Croft. This felt more important. Finally, he opened his eyes and looked straight at me. A single tear was rolling down his weathered cheek. "Ah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "So this is what my tomatoes are supposed to taste like." He took another bite. "It tastes like my mother's kitchen. It tastes like sunshine." He looked at the plate, then back at me. "When can you start?" "I can start now," I said, a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees, washing over me. Sal's booming laugh filled the small restaurant. "Good, because my back is killing me and Maria is threatening to go to law school if she has to peel one more clove of garlic." He stood up, his demeanor all business now. "All right, house rules. First, nobody calls you chef. Here, you're just Juliet. Second, what I say goes. My kitchen, my roof, my rules. Third, you teach Maria everything you know. That girl is my legacy. Agreed?" "Agreed," I said without hesitation. "Benny, there's a small apartment upstairs. It's not the fancy place you're used to, but it's clean and the rent is cheap. You can stay there." He paused, his expression growing serious. "This idea of yours, this ghost chef, it's a dangerous game. Pride is a powerful thing. When a man like your Arthur feels his pride is threatened, he can become a monster." "I'm counting on it," I said, a sliver of steel in my voice. My first few days at Sal's were a lesson in humility. I went from commanding a brigade of 20 cooks to being the prep cook, the line cook, and half the time, the dishwasher. Maria, Sal's granddaughter, was a whirlwind of youthful energy and skepticism. She was in her early 20s, with her grandfather's dark, expressive eyes and a sharp intelligence that missed nothing. She'd grown up in this trattoria, and to her, I was an intruder. "So, the fancy Manhattan chef thinks she can cook peasant food now?" she asked on my second day, her arms crossed as she watched me dice an onion with a speed and precision she'd never seen before. "There's no such thing as peasant food, Maria," I replied, my knife a blur. "Only honest food." "My nonno seems to think you're some kind of cooking messiah," she scoffed. "He cried eating your pasta. My grandfather hasn't cried since the Mets lost the '86 World Series." "It was good pasta," I said with a small smile, "and they were good tomatoes." She wasn't won over easily. She tested me, watching my every move, questioning my techniques. Why did I toast the peppercorns before grinding them? Why did I add a Parmesan rind to the minestrone broth? Why did I insist on blanching the almonds for the pesto myself instead of buying them pre-peeled? Because toasting the peppercorns releases their essential oils, making them more fragrant, I explained patiently, day after day. The rind adds a deep, savory umami flavor to the soup that you can't get from just adding grated cheese at the end. And pre-peeled almonds are often dry. Blanching them ourselves keeps them plump and oily, which makes for a creamier pesto. Slowly, very slowly, her suspicion began to melt, replaced by a grudging respect, and then by a hungry curiosity. She started asking questions not to challenge me, but to learn. She became my shadow, my first and only student. Meanwhile, Elena was executing the next phase of our plan. She had her lawyer send a carefully worded letter to Arthur's attorney, a polite but firm inquiry about the intellectual property of my culinary creations. "It's a complete bluff," Elena explained to me over the phone one night, her voice buzzing with excitement. "But it will achieve two things. First, it makes him nervous. It plants the idea in his head that you might fight back legally. Second, and more importantly, it forces him to double down on his idiotic belief that the recipes themselves are the magic. He'll push that poor girl, Isabel, to replicate your food even more precisely, which will only make her failures more spectacular." As predicted, the reports from my spy in the trenches, Marco, grew more and more dire. "Chef, it's a bloodbath," he whispered into the phone from the walk-in freezer, the only place he could get privacy. He bought a refractometer, to make sure the brick's level of her seafood essence matches the notes in the binder. He's trying to turn your art into a math equation, and it's a disaster. The staff is miserable. Liam is the new sous chef, and he's a tyrant. 3 line cooks quit this week. "And the customers?" I asked, stirring a pot of simmering ragu that had been slow cooking for 6 hours. "They're noticing," he said grimly. "The regulars, they're polite, but they're confused. They say the food looks the same, but it lacks soul." One of them actually used that word. Soul. Arthur almost had an aneurysm. "Good," I said. "Stay the course, Marco. You're my eyes and ears." "Always, chef. By the way, your ragu smells amazing. I can practically smell it through the phone." I smiled. "It's Sal's mother's recipe. He finally trusted me with it." My life settled into a new rhythm. I woke up with the sun, went to the market with Sal, and spent my days in the warm, fragrant kitchen with Maria. I wasn't creating transcendent, Michelin-starred plates. I was perfecting the classics. I taught Maria how to make gnocchi as light as clouds, a carbonara so perfectly emulsified it was like silk, a branzino baked in a salt crust that steamed with the scent of the sea when you cracked it open. I was cooking from the heart, without the pressure of stars or critics. I was falling in love with food all over again. We didn't change the menu at Sal's. We just made everything on it perfect. The regulars, the neighborhood locals who had been eating here for years, started to notice. "Sal, what's going on back there?" asked Mrs. Falcone, a formidable Italian grandmother who had been a patron for 30 years. "Your lasagna, it's different. It tastes like my mother's, God rest her soul, only better. Don't tell her I said that." Sal would just beam and point a thumb towards the kitchen. "My Maria, she's got a new teacher." Word began to spread, not in a flashy, PR-driven way, but in the old-fashioned way. Whispers, a quiet recommendation from one friend to another. People from other neighborhoods started showing up, then people from Manhattan. They were foodies, adventurers, drawn by the rumor of a simple trattoria in Brooklyn that was serving, by some accounts, the best Italian food in New York City. One evening, about 2 months after I had started, Elena came for dinner. She sat at a corner table, watching the packed dining room with a satisfied smirk. The place was buzzing with an energy it had never had before. "Look at this," she said, her voice low as I brought her a plate of the Cassio e Pepe Maria had made. "You've created a cult, and you haven't spent a dime on advertising." "Good food is the best advertising," I said, repeating one of Sal's favorite maxims. Elena took a bite of the pasta, her eyes widened. "Oh my God, Juliet, this is a religious experience. How is this possible with just pasta, cheese, and pepper?" "The secret," I whispered, leaning in, "is the toasted pepper. And using a blend of Pecorino Romano and a younger, milder Pecorino to balance the salt. And the technique for the emulsion is all in the wrist." She shook her head in awe. "Arthur is serving chemistry experiments for $1,000 a head, and you're over here performing actual magic for $20 a plate." She looked around the room again, her gaze sharp and calculating. "The buzz is building. I hear it in the galleries, at the cocktail parties. People are talking. They don't know your name, but they know something special is happening here." She took another bite of pasta, then looked me dead in the eye. "It's time." My heart started to pound. "You think?" "I know, the stage is set, the audience is hungry," she said. "It's time to invite the critic." She pulled out her phone. "I have a contact, a personal assistant to Julian Croft. I can't guarantee anything, but I can plant a seed, a very, very tempting seed." "What are you going to say?" Elena's smile was pure, uncut wickedness. "I'm going to tell her that I've heard a rumor about a ghost. The ghost of a legendary chef, cooking in a tiny, unmarked kitchen in Brooklyn, making the most incredible food in the city. I'm going to tell her it's probably just a myth, but what if it's not?" She looked at me, her eyes dancing. "Critics can't resist a mystery, Juliet, especially one that promises a legend." The week after Elena's call was the longest of my life. Every time the bell on the trattoria door jingled, my stomach would lurch. I found myself scrutinizing every customer who walked in alone, every man in a slightly too nice suit, every person who seemed to be paying a little too much attention to the texture of their pasta. "You're going to give yourself an ulcer," Sal said, watching me peek through the kitchen door for the 10th time one night. "He'll come when he comes, or he won't. All we can do is what we always do, cook good food." Maria, now my devoted apprentice, was a nervous wreck. "What if he orders the branzino? The oven has been running a little hot today. What if the salt crust cracks? What if he wants the carbonara and I mess up the emulsion? What if—" "Maria," I said, putting my hands on her shoulders. "Breathe. You've made that carbonara perfectly 100 times. The oven is fine. You are a fantastic cook. Forget about him. Just cook for Mrs. Falcone at table 3. Cook with love. The rest will take care of itself." She took a shaky breath and nodded, her focus returning to the pan in her hand. I was proud of her. In just a few months, she had transformed from a skeptical kid into a confident, capable cook. She had good instincts, a sensitive palate, and most importantly, she had heart. Elena's seed planting had worked. 2 days after her call, she'd gotten a cryptic message back. "Intriguing. JC is always interested in a good story." That was it. No confirmation, no reservation, just a dangling thread of possibility. Then, on a Tuesday, usually our quietest night, it happened. The bell jingled. A man I didn't recognize walked in. He was unassuming, dressed in a simple tweed jacket, with thinning hair and observant eyes behind a pair of unremarkable glasses. He could have been an accountant or a history professor. He asked for a table for one in the corner, and the young waiter, Sal's nephew Frankie, seated him without a second thought. But I knew I knew from the way he held the menu, the way his eyes scanned the room not as a customer, but as an observer. I knew from the quiet, almost professional way he watched the other diners receive their food. My heart was a trip hammer against my ribs. I ducked back into the kitchen. "It's him," I mouthed to Sal. Sal's eyes widened. He wiped his sweaty palms on his apron and peered through the pass. "The little guy in the jacket? He looks like my dentist." "It's him," I repeated, my voice firm. "I'm sure of it." Frankie came into the kitchen, oblivious. "Order up, table 7. He wants the spaghetti al pomodoro and a glass of the house red." Of all the things he could have ordered, the simplest dish on the menu, my test, my first creation in this kitchen, it felt like a sign. "I'll take this one," I said to Maria, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "Are you sure?" she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. "Positive. You handle the Falcon's veal saltimbocca. I've got this." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. This was not about Michelin stars. This was not about revenge. This was about a man, a plate of pasta, and the truth. I moved with a focus that bordered on religious. I selected the tomatoes, the garlic, the basil, as if I were choosing precious gems. I performed the familiar ritual, the simple alchemy of turning 5 humble ingredients into something sublime. But this time, I put everything I had into it. My anger at Arthur, my gratitude to Sal, my pride in Maria, my rediscovery of my own passion. I poured it all into that simple, simmering sauce. When it was ready, I didn't let Frankie take it. I plated it myself, wiping the rim of the simple ceramic bowl until it shone. I took off my apron and carried the plate out myself. As I approached the table, Julian Croft looked up from his notes. His eyes met mine, and for a split second, a flicker of recognition, of pure, unadulterated shock crossed his face. He knew. I placed the plate in front of him. "Buona sera," I said quietly, my voice even. "Enjoy your meal." I didn't say my name. I didn't have to. I walked back to the kitchen, my legs feeling like jelly. I didn't watch him. I trusted the food to speak for me. The entire kitchen held its breath. Sal wrung his hands. Maria chewed on her fingernails. From our vantage point, we saw him take the first bite. We saw him close his eyes, just as Sal had done. We saw him put his fork down and just sit there for a full minute, contemplating. Then he picked it up again and ate the entire plate of pasta, slowly, deliberately, savoring every single bite. He didn't order anything else. When he was finished, he paid his bill in cash, left a 50% tip, and walked out without a word. The silence he left behind was deafening. "What does that mean?" Maria finally asked, her voice a squeak. "He didn't order anything else. He hated it." "No," Sal said, his voice a low rumble of awe. "It means it was perfect. When something is perfect, you don't need anything else. It was a statement." I leaned against the counter, my body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. Now we wait. The review came out on Friday. Elena called me at 6 in the morning. "Are you sitting down?" she screamed into the phone. "Because you're not going to believe this. Just read it to me, Elena." Her voice shook with emotion as she read from the New York Times website. The headline was, "The Ghost of Carroll Gardens and the Return of Soul." "Forget everything you think you know about fine dining," she read. "Forget the foams, the gels, the $1,000 tasting menus. I am here to tell you that the single most profound, most memorable, and most utterly perfect dish I have eaten this year was a simple plate of spaghetti pomodoro, served in a humble 15-table trattoria in Brooklyn." "There are rumors," she continued, her voice cracking, "whispers of a culinary phantom haunting this kitchen, a chef of immense talent choosing to cook in anonymity. I cannot confirm these rumors. But I can confirm this. The food at Sal's trattoria is not merely cooked, it is conjured. Each dish, from a cloud-like gnocchi to a transcendently simple plate of pasta, is crafted with a level of technique, precision, and most importantly soul that I have not encountered since the glory days of El Idol Falante. Speaking of which," Elena's voice turned sharp, gleeful. "I revisited that 3-star establishment earlier this week for the sake of comparison. I found a beautiful room serving beautiful, technically precise, and utterly lifeless food. It was like looking at a perfect photograph of a meal instead of eating the meal itself. The famous Veil of the Sea was a cloudy, brittle mess. The brand is there, the prices are there, but the magic is gone. It seems the shooting star has well and truly fallen." Elena had to stop. She was laughing so hard. I sank onto a kitchen stool, the phone pressed to my ear, tears streaming down my face. She took a deep breath and read the final paragraph. "I don't know who is in the kitchen at Sal's, and frankly, I don't care. It is not about a name or a star rating. It is about the transportive power of honest, brilliant cooking. My advice, go now beg for a table. It is, without exaggeration, the most important restaurant in New York City right now. It is nothing less than a resurrection. When she finished, there was a stunned silence. Juliet, are you there? I'm here, I whispered. Well, ghost of Carroll Gardens, she said, her voice filled with love and pride. Welcome back to the land of the living. I hung up the phone. A strange noise was coming from outside, a low, growing murmur. I walked to the front of the restaurant and looked out the window. There was a line of people stretching from our front door, down the block, and around the corner. It was 6:15 in the morning. Sal and Maria came and stood beside me, their faces a mixture of shock and wonder. The bell on the door jingled. It was Marco. His face was pale, but his eyes were shining. He was holding up his phone. Chef, he said, his voice filled with disbelief. El Adel Falante, they just lost a star. The Michelin Guide released a surprise mid-season update. Effective immediately, they lost a star. He looked from the phone to the line of people outside. It's over for him, chef. Sal put a heavy, warm arm around my shoulders. No, figlia mia, he said, his voice rumbling with pride. It's just the beginning for you. The aftermath of the review was a tsunami. Our phone didn't just ring, it screamed, a constant, shrill shriek until Sal finally took it off the hook. The line outside didn't disappear. It became a semi-permanent fixture, a pilgrimage of food lovers, journalists, and the morbidly curious, all hoping for a taste of the ghost's cooking. We were on the news, in the food blogs, the talk of the city. Sal's trattoria, my quiet little sanctuary, had become the epicenter of the culinary world. We need a hostess, we need more waiters, we need a bigger kitchen. Sal bellowed, half panicked, half elated, as he navigated the chaos of our now permanently packed dining room. Maria, we need more gnocchi. Juliet, Mrs. Falcone at table 2 says your pomodoro is even better than last week's. How is this possible? I was in my element. The pressure was immense, but it was a different kind of pressure. It wasn't the cold, intellectual pressure of maintaining stars. It was the warm, vibrant pressure of feeding people who were genuinely, deliriously happy to be there. I hired 2 young, hungry cooks from the neighborhood to help with prep, and they looked at me with the kind of awe I used to reserve for my own mentors. Maria rose to the occasion, becoming my sous chef in everything but name, commanding the pasta station with a newfound confidence. We didn't change a thing. We kept the checkered tablecloths. We kept the simple, handwritten menu. We kept our prices reasonable. The magic of Sal's was its authenticity, and I was fiercely protective of it. Meanwhile, the empire across the river was crumbling. Marco's reports became less about culinary failures and more about pure, desperate chaos. He's in a full-blown panic, Marco told me during one of our clandestine calls. Since losing the star, the reservation book is half empty. He fired Isabel, fired her, just threw her out like he did with you. Liam is trying to run the kitchen, but he's just copying your old menus from a year ago. It's a joke. What about Arthur? I asked, a strange detachment in my voice. He's a ghost. He barely comes in. When he does, he just walks around the empty dining room, looking lost. Yesterday, I heard him on the phone, begging some chef from Chicago to come and take over. The guy laughed at him. It was a pathetic end, not a dramatic one. He wasn't being ruined by a grand, fiery act of revenge, but by the slow, quiet erosion of his own arrogance. He had believed the beautiful frame was more important than the masterpiece inside it. Now all he had was an empty frame. A few weeks later, Alina called me. You need to see this, she said, her voice tight. Check your email. She had forwarded me a link to a real estate listing. It was for a prime restaurant space in a prestigious Manhattan location. I clicked through the photos. It was El Adel Falante. The crystal chandeliers, the velvet banquettes, the bar where Arthur and I had celebrated our first star, it was all for sale. Lock, stock, and barrel. I felt nothing. No triumphant glee, no satisfying schadenfreude, just a quiet sense of an ending. A chapter closing. He's selling it, I said to Sal, showing him my phone. He peered at the screen. HMPH, a kitchen without a cook is just a room full of expensive metal. He finally figured it out. He looked at me, his eyes kind. Does this make you happy? I thought about it for a moment. It makes me feel free, I said, and I was surprised to find that it was the truth. The war is over, Sal. Good, he said, clapping me on the back, because now the real work begins. The real work came in the form of a visitor the following week. It wasn't a critic this time. A sleek black car, the kind that usually only appeared in our neighborhood in mob movies, pulled up outside the trattoria. A woman in a sharply tailored suit stepped out. She was in her 50s with an air of quiet, formidable power. She walked into the restaurant and asked Frankie if she could speak to the owner. Sal came out, wiping his hands on his apron. I am Salvatore Rossi, he said. A pleasure, the woman said, her voice crisp and direct. My name is Genevieve Dubois. I froze in the kitchen doorway, my mother. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year. She was the matriarch of our family, the owner of a 2-star Michelin restaurant in Lyon where I had first learned to cook. We were complicated. She was a woman of tradition, of discipline. She had seen my move to New York and my partnership with Arthur as a betrayal of my classical French roots. Mammon. I whispered, stepping out of the kitchen. Her stern expression melted, just for a second, into one of relief. She looked me up and down, taking in my simple clothes, my flour-dusted apron. Juliette, she said, her French accent coloring the word. So the rumors are true. You have abandoned haute cuisine for macaroni. It's called pasta, mammon, I said, a smile tugging at my lips. Sal, looking back and forth between us, finally understood. Ah, la mama, paisier, please sit, have a coffee. Have some grappa, it's on the house. My mother allowed herself to be seated, but she waved away the offer of a drink. I am here on business, she announced. She looked at me. I have read the articles, all of them. In Paris, they are calling you Le Fantôme de Brooklyn. It is very dramatic. I didn't choose the name, I said. No, you simply chose the cooking, she said, and there was a note of something I hadn't heard in her voice in a long time, respect. I have also heard that this, Arthur Vance, is finished, that he has sold Elaidel Falante. That's true, I confirmed. Good, she said with a firm nod. Fools and their money are soon parted, so the question is, what is next for you? You cannot stay in this charming but very small place forever. A talent like yours needs the proper stage. I'm happy here, mammon. Happiness does not earn Michelin stars, she sniffed, but her eyes betrayed her. She was looking around the vibrant, joyful dining room at the happy faces of the customers, and I could see a crack in her rigid, classical facade. That's why I am here, she continued, getting back to business. I have a proposal. I have spoken to some investors, old friends. They have purchased the lease and the assets of Elaidel Falante. My jaw dropped. You bought it? We bought it, she corrected. And we are offering you the position of executive chef and a partnership stake. Full creative control. You can rebuild it in your own image. No more Arthurs, just you, your name above the door. Juliette. Simple, powerful. It will be the grand return, the triumph. It was everything I had ever thought I wanted. The keys to the kingdom, my name in lights. The chance to reclaim my stars, my throne, the perfect storybook ending to my revenge. I looked around Sal's little dining room. I saw Mrs. Falcone laughing with her grandchildren. I saw a young couple on a first date, nervously sharing a plate of tiramisu. I saw Sal, standing by the bar, beaming like a proud father. This place had a soul. It wasn't a stage, it was a home. I looked back at my mother. Thank you, mammon, it's an incredible offer, but my answer is no. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother look truly speechless. No, are you insane? This is your destiny. No, I said, my voice filled with a calm certainty I had never felt before. This, I said, gesturing around the trattoria, is my destiny. Elaidel Falante was Arthur's dream. I was just the engine he used to make it run. But this place, this is mine. The food we cook here, it's not about impressing anyone. It's about nourishing them. It's about joy. And that's not something I'm willing to give up, not for any number of stars. My mother stared at me, her mind clearly struggling to process my refusal. Then Sal spoke up from the bar. Excuse me, Madame Dubois, he said, his voice respectful but firm. Your daughter is a genius, but this kitchen is too small for her genius. This is true. He walked over to our table. But maybe we don't need a new kitchen. Maybe we just need a bigger table. He looked from my mother to me, a brilliant, audacious idea dawning in his eyes. We combine the technique of France, the heart of Italy, the resources of your investors, the soul of this neighborhood. We don't rebuild Elaidel Falante. We build something new, something better. Sal and Juliette's, or Juliette and Sal's, I'm not picky. My mother looked at this huge, flour-dusted Italian man, suggesting they become business partners. I held my breath, expecting her to laugh in his face. Instead, she studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at me. A slow, calculating smile, the one I recognized from my own reflection when I was planning a menu, spread across her face. Tell me more about your tomatoes, Monsieur Rossi, she said. The next few months were a blur of controlled, exhilarating chaos. The partnership between my mother, the lioness of Lyonnaise haute cuisine, and Salvatore Rossi, the patriarch of Brooklyn pasta, was a culture clash of epic proportions. Their negotiations were a sight to behold, conducted over tiny cups of espresso and massive plates of prosciutto. Mammon would talk about profit margins and brand synergy. Sal would talk about the importance of fresh ricotta and treating his staff like family. Miraculously, they found common ground, a shared, unwavering belief in the sanctity of the ingredient. We didn't take over the old elatal Falante space. Mammon's investors sold it at a profit. Instead, we did something far more radical. We bought the building next door to Sal's, an old, derelict laundromat, and knocked down the wall between them. We created a new space, not by erasing the old one, but by expanding it. One side of the restaurant was the trattoria, which remained Sal's domain. The red and white checkered tablecloth stayed. The menu of perfected classics remained. It was the heart of our operation, loud, joyful, and smelling perpetually of garlic. The new side, connected by a wide, open archway, was the counter. This was my domain. It was a sleek, intimate space with only 20 seats, all arranged around a large, open kitchen. There was no barrier between the cooks and the guests. Here, I served a single, constantly evolving tasting menu. I took the techniques of my French training and applied them to the soulful, honest ingredients Sal procured. It was my whisper of God, but this time, it was a whisper everyone could lean in and hear. Our team was a beautiful mosaic. Maria became the chef de cuisine of the trattoria, a confident and inspiring leader. Marco, having finally walked out of the wreckage of elatal Falante, became my sous chef at the counter, his perpetually furrowed brow finally relaxed into a look of intense, creative joy. Even Liam, the ambitious line cook from my old kitchen, showed up one day, hat in hand. He'd been humbled, fired from the sinking ship, and he begged for a chance to start over, to learn about food, not just formulas. I put him on the vegetable prep station, the lowest rung on the ladder. He accepted with gratitude. Elena, of course, was our unofficial marketing guru. She designed a logo, a simple ampersand connecting a sprig of basil and a sprig of thyme. She cultivated our story not with press releases, but with whispers. She ensured we remained the city's most wonderful secret, even as we became its most sought-after reservation. One night, about a year after we opened the new space, I was at the pass, inspecting a plate before it went out. It was my new signature dish, a single, perfect agnolotto, filled with a puree of Sal's sweetest tomatoes, served in a crystal-clear Parmesan broth, and topped with 1 drop of 25-year-old balsamic vinegar. It was Italy and France, simplicity and complexity, Sal and me, all in a single bite. Juliet. I looked up. Arthur Vance was standing on the other side of the counter. I hadn't seen him since the day I'd walked out of his loft. He looked diminished. The bespoke suit was still there, but it hung on him differently. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a weary hesitation. He looked older. "Arthur," I said, my voice neutral. I felt a strange calm. The raging fire of my anger had long ago burned down to quiet, settled embers. "I don't have a reservation," he said, looking around the packed, vibrant room. I heard what you were doing here. I had to see it." "As you can see, we're very busy," I said, turning my attention back to the plate. "It's incredible," he whispered, his eyes on the seamless dance of the cooks in my open kitchen. "The energy, the joy, we never had this." "No," I agreed. "We didn't." He was silent for a moment. "Heard you got your 3 stars back," he said quietly. The Michelin Guide had awarded the counter its highest honor 6 months earlier. The trattoria had been given a Bib Gourmand, an award for excellent, affordable food. The press had called it an unprecedented dual victory. "The stars aren't the point, Arthur," I said, finally looking at him. "They never were." "I know that now," he said, his voice raw. "I had the best chef in the world, and I thought I could own her talent. I thought it was a line item on a balance sheet. I was a fool." He looked me in the eye, and for the first time I saw genuine remorse. "I'm sorry, Juliet, for everything." I held his gaze. I thought about the pain, the betrayal, the humiliation. And I thought about where it had led me, to this beautiful kitchen, to this wonderful family, to this life which was so much richer and more authentic than the gilded cage I had left behind. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a restaurant to run." I turned away, a signal that the conversation was over. He lingered for another moment, a ghost at the feast, and then he was gone. Later that night, after the last customer had left and the kitchens were quiet, the whole team gathered around a large table in the trattoria, as we did every night. Sal opened a bottle of his best Barolo. Maria brought out a huge platter of cheese and bread. We ate and drank and talked, our voices echoing in the warm, happy space. "To us," Sal said, raising his glass. To family," we all echoed. I looked around the table. At Sal, my mentor and partner. At my mother, who now spent half the year in New York, offering stern but loving critiques of my sauces. At Maria, who was glowing as she talked about the new dish she was developing. at Marco, Alina, and all the others who had stood by me. I realized then what the true secret ingredient had been all along. It wasn't the combo in my seafood essence or the toasted pepper in my Casio e pepe. It was trust, it was love. It was the simple, profound act of people coming together to create something beautiful, something honest, something with soul. Arthur had tried to steal my recipes, but he could never steal the relationships that made them possible. He had a binder full of instructions, but I had a room full of family. And that was a recipe he could never replicate. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo of a perfectly plated, if slightly clumsy, plate of gnocchi. The text below it read, "First day of culinary school. Thank you for the inspiration. Isabel." I smiled and typed back a simple reply, "Keep cooking." Because that's what we do. We fall, we break, we get back up. We take the bitterest ingredients life throws at us, and we find a way to make something sweet. We keep cooking. The story of Sal and Juliet's became a quiet legend in New York. We never chased accolades, but they found us anyway. More awards, glowing articles, a documentary series. Through it all, we held fast to our core principle: honest food cooked with love. The line outside never truly went away, but it became a different kind of line, less about hype, more about community. It was filled with regulars who had become friends and travelers who had come seeking not just a meal, but an experience. One crisp autumn afternoon, several years after we'd opened, I was in the kitchen at the counter, working with Liam on a new dish involving roasted pumpkin and sage. He was my sous chef now, his early arrogance replaced by a quiet, profound respect for the craft. "Chef," he said, holding up a spoonful of puree for me to taste. "I think it needs a bit more acidity, maybe a touch of brown butter vinegar." I tasted it. He was right. "Good call, Liam, your palate has become impeccable." He beamed with a pride that was deep and genuine. I had a good teacher. Just then my mother swept into the kitchen, looking imperious as ever in a silk scarf and designer sunglasses, though I knew she had a soft spot for the chaos of our kitchen. "Juliet," she announced, "you have a visitor, an important one." I wiped my hands. "Mammon, everyone who eats here is important." "This one is different," she said, a cryptic twinkle in her eye. "He is waiting for you in the trattoria." "He asked specifically for you." I walked through the archway into the comforting bustle of the trattoria. Sal was holding court at a corner table, regaling a group of tourists with a story about his grandfather's olive groves in Sicily. And sitting at the small table where my journey here had begun, the very table where I had served Sal that first plate of pomodoro, was Julian Croft. He looked older, his tweed jacket a little more frayed, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He stood as I approached. "Chef Dubois," he said, his voice filled with a warmth I hadn't heard before. "It is an honor." "Mr. Croft," I replied, shaking his hand, "the honor is all mine. You changed my life." "No," he said, shaking his head, "I just wrote down what your cooking told me. You changed your own life." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "May I?" I sat down, my heart beating a little faster. "I am retiring next month," he began without preamble. "I am writing my last column for the Times. A reflection on a career of eating, on the meals that mattered." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "That's quite a legacy. Which brings me to why I am here," he continued. "Of all the thousands of meals, the hundreds of restaurants, the dozens of chefs of the century, the story that has stayed with me, the one that I believe defines what great cooking is truly about, is yours. It's the story of this place." He looked around the room at the laughing families, the checkered tablecloths, the simple, beautiful plates of food being carried from the kitchen. "I have been asked many times what the secret is to a 3-star restaurant," he said, his gaze returning to me. "For years, my answer was about technique, consistency, innovation. I was wrong. The secret is love. A restaurant without love, without soul, is just a beautifully decorated room where you can pay to eat. This place has more soul than any restaurant I have ever known." I was speechless, moved beyond words. "I am not here to review you," he said. "I am here as my last official act to ask a favor. I want to tell your story, the real story, not the myth of the ghost, but the truth of the woman who lost everything and built something even better in its place, because that is a story people need to hear." I thought about the pain of my betrayal, the humility of starting over, the joy of rediscovery. I looked over at Sal, who caught my eye and gave me a huge, reassuring wink. I saw Maria confidently directing the kitchen staff. I saw the "and" in our logo, the symbol of partnership, of connection. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. It wasn't about what I had lost. It was about what I had found. "Okay, Julian," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "Let's talk. But first, have you eaten? I make a pretty good plate of spaghetti." His answering smile was radiant. "I was hoping you'd say that." As I walked back to the kitchen to cook for him one last time, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been a trial by fire, but it had forged me into something stronger, truer. I had learned that success isn't measured in stars, but in the connections we make. It's not about the name above the door, but the family within the walls. The best revenge, I had discovered, wasn't letting your enemies destroy themselves while you built something better. The best revenge was to build something so full of life, so full of joy and love and authenticity, that you forgot you were ever seeking revenge in the first place. You were too busy living, too busy creating, too busy being happy. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered.